The morning of my wedding started quietly, almost dreamlike. I stood in the soft light of the bridal suite, smoothing my gown, trying to calm the small tremor in my chest. I told myself this day would finally be mine, one moment in my life not overshadowed by my sister Serafina or controlled by my parents. But peace never lasts long in my family. The door burst open so hard the hinges shook. Serafina marched in like she owned the room, my parents right behind her. Their faces already held that familiar mix of entitlement and irritation. Serafina didn't even say hello. She went straight into her announcement. She was pregnant, and she would be revealing it during my reception toasts. She said it like she was gifting me something, not stealing the spotlight from the one day meant for me. She added that our mother called it perfect timing, and the proud smile on Evangeline's face made my stomach twist. I told them no. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I just said this was my wedding and her announcement could wait. But Serafina never handled boundaries well. Her eyes flashed with anger, and before I could step back, she grabbed my veil, my custom, hand-beaded veil, and ripped it straight down the middle. The sound of the tear felt louder than her scream. My mother didn't defend me. Instead, she slapped me so hard my cheek burned, calling me selfish for ruining Serafina's moment. And then my father grabbed my arm, twisting it behind my back with enough force to make me gasp. He leaned in and told me to stop being dramatic, to smile, and to remember that family always comes first, meaning Serafina always came first. Serafina pushed me back into the mirror, close enough that I saw my own reflection shake. She told me to stay out of her way, or I'd regret it. Then they walked out with my torn veil like it was a trophy. The door closed behind them, and for a long second the room was silent except for my heartbeat. I expected myself to cry. That was my pattern growing up: break, collect myself, pretend nothing happened. But this time something inside me shifted. I didn't fall apart. I went cold, steady, and strangely calm. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't powerless. I walked to the vanity, picked up my phone with a steady hand, and opened my messages. There was only one word I needed to send. One word my maid of honor and best friend Bryn Callahan and I had agreed on months ago, just in case my family crossed a line they couldn't come back from. Blackbird. I hit send. That was the moment everything changed. I didn't know how big the fallout would be yet. I didn't know how loud the truth would explode later. I just knew my family had finally pushed me too far, and I wasn't walking into that ceremony alone anymore. I took a slow breath and fixed my hair with the simple comb one of the bridesmaids handed me. It wasn't the veil I had chosen, but it was enough to keep me steady. I focused on the one thing that still felt safe: Asher. When I walked toward him at the altar, the tension in my chest eased. His warm smile grounded me, and for a moment, the chaos from the morning faded. Saying my vows felt like stepping into a future I had chosen for myself, not one forced on me by anyone else. When he squeezed my hands, I knew I had someone who truly saw me. The ceremony passed smoothly, and soon we were at the reception. The hall was filled with soft lights and quiet chatter, but underneath it, I felt the sharp presence of my family. Serafina sat at the main table looking like she was already the star of the evening. She kept touching her stomach as if waiting for people to ask. My parents watched me closely, making sure I acted cheerful enough. Their eyes followed my every move, checking for any sign I might step out of line. Still, I smiled, spoke kindly to guests, and focused on keeping the night calm. Asher stayed close, sensing something wasn't right. Every so often he leaned in and asked, "You okay?" I nodded each time, not wanting him to worry. Bryn moved around the room with practiced ease, whispering instructions to the staff I didn't know she had briefed earlier. Whenever our eyes met, she gave me a small nod. It meant the plan was in motion. Dinner went by with polite conversations and clinking glasses. I watched Serafina closely, noticing how she lifted her chin a little higher every time someone looked her way. She was waiting for her moment, and my parents were encouraging it with subtle smiles. They believed they had full control of the night. When the DJ announced that anyone could come up and share a short message for the bride and groom, the room shifted. Chairs scraped, people laughed, and a few guests prepared to walk forward. But Serafina rose before anyone else could move. She stood with a bright, practiced smile, the kind she wore when she wanted the whole world to focus on her. Her dress sparkled under the lights as she walked confidently toward the podium, already imagining the attention she would get. My heart thudded once, heavy and slow. Not from fear because I knew what was coming, but from the quiet certainty that the next few minutes would end everything my family had built on lies. Serafina lifted her hand toward the microphone, her face glowing with triumph. But I didn't look away. I stayed seated, perfectly calm, waiting for the moment Bryn would step in. The setup was complete. The stage was hers, for now. Serafina reached for the microphone with that bright, confident smile she always used when she wanted the whole room to look at her. But before her fingers even touched it, Bryn moved. I watched her step forward with smooth, practiced ease, slipping into Serafina's path so naturally it almost looked choreographed. 1 second Serafina was about to speak, and the next Bryn was standing at the podium instead, blocking her from view. I felt my breath catch, not from fear, but from knowing this was the moment everything would start. Serafina froze, her shock lasting only a heartbeat before she lunged toward the mic. She tried to squeeze past Bryn, but Bryn shifted her body just enough to stop her without looking rough. Guests whispered, their confusion growing as they realized something serious was happening. Bryn lifted the microphone, her voice calm and steady. Before we move on, we need to clear up something important about Serafina's news. Her tone was so controlled that it cut through the noise instantly. Serafina let out a sharp scream, grabbing for the mic again, anger spilling out of her in front of everyone. That was when my parents shot up from their seats. My mother shouted about respect. My father barked about ruining the moment, and together they tried to drown out Bryn's voice. But Bryn didn't flinch. She didn't even look at them. I watched her straighten her shoulders, lift her chin, and speak louder without raising her tone. "My name is Bryn Callahan," she said, "and I am a licensed private investigator. I was hired to look into a matter that affects the bride and groom." The room went silent so fast it felt like the air had been pulled out of it. People stopped moving. Forks hovered midair. Even the DJ froze with his hand over the speaker controls. I felt every pair of eyes shift between Bryn and my family, trying to understand what this meant. My parents sank back in their chairs, their anger replaced with stiff, uncomfortable stillness. Serafina, hidden behind Bryn, shook with fury. She tried whispering demands to our parents, but her voice was too small to reach anyone now. The attention she had been craving wasn't hers anymore. It was slipping out of her hands, and she knew it. Standing there, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't chaos, it was clarity. For the first time in my life, the truth wasn't being shoved aside to protect someone else. The moment was unfolding exactly as it needed to. Bryn kept her eyes on the crowd, her posture steady, holding the microphone like she had been preparing for this her whole life. The room felt heavy, like the air right before a storm breaks open. Everyone knew something big was about to be revealed, and I knew my family would never be able to hide again. Bryn held the microphone steady while reaching into her bag with her free hand. I knew what she was about to show, but seeing it unfold in front of everyone still made my pulse pick up. She pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen, and the venue's monitors lit up at once. Asher had arranged the setup days earlier, and the manager, his close friend, had everything ready on cue. The room turned toward the screens, curious and unsettled. Bryn stood calmly beside the podium, giving everyone a moment to focus. The first image appeared, an online order receipt. The item listed was a novelty positive pregnancy test. People squinted, leaning closer, unsure of what they were looking at. Bryn didn't rush. She allowed the crowd to read the date, the seller, the shipping confirmation, everything clear and time-stamped. Then she swiped to the next document, a pharmacy receipt. This one was for a prescription acne medication with strict warnings printed in bold letters, the kind that doctors never give to pregnant women. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Several guests exchanged glances, already piecing things together. Both receipts were from the same week. I watched Holden, Serafina's husband, staring up at the screens. His shoulders stiffened, and his eyes darkened as each detail sank in. Bryn continued without raising her voice. She tapped the tablet again, and now a series of messages filled the screens. These were between my mother and Serafina. People around the room reacted instantly. Some sucked in breaths, others muttered quietly. One message from my mother read, "The pregnancy is the ultimate trump card. She can't compete with that." Another from Serafina said, "What if Holden asks for proof?" And my mother's reply followed, "We'll manage him. We always do." A wave of shock rippled through the room. Guests turned their heads toward my parents, who sat frozen. My mother's face drained of color, and my father's jaw locked tight. Serafina, who had been trembling behind Bryn, snapped. "That's fake," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Those are deep fakes. She made that up." Her hands shook so violently she nearly lost her balance. She tried to push forward again, but Bryn kept her stance, not engaging, not arguing, just letting the truth speak for itself. Holden stood slowly from his chair. His eyes didn't leave the screens. His expression wasn't loud or angry. It was the kind of quiet heartbreak that fills the room more powerfully than shouting ever could. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. It was as if he couldn't understand how the woman he married could deceive him so deeply. The guests remained silent, the atmosphere thick with disbelief and disappointment. I felt a hollow ache in my chest as I watched the truth unravel in public, but there was also a strange sense of release. For once, the lies weren't aimed at me. For once, people saw what I had lived with for years. Serafina kept insisting everything was fake, but her voice only sounded smaller each time. No one believed her. The receipts were detailed, the messages were personal. The dates added up, and the truth was too solid to ignore. Bryn didn't gloat. She didn't add anything unnecessary. She simply lowered the tablet, letting the evidence sit heavily in the air, while Serafina's false story began to collapse right in front of her. And in that moment, the entire room finally saw the person she truly was. Bryn waited until the whispers died down before she spoke again. The tension in the room felt sharp, like everyone was holding their breath at the same time. I stood still, watching her move to the next part of the truth, the part I knew would shake the room even more. She changed the screen, and a new set of documents appeared. "Now," she said calmly, "you need to understand the reason behind all of this." People leaned forward, bracing themselves. Bryn explained that Serafina's marriage to Holden wasn't built on affection or respect. It was built on access. Holden's family had created a financial clause generations ago. After the birth of a first child, a large inheritance would be released directly to the parents. The money came without taxes, without conditions, and without the need for further approval. It was meant to protect future families, not to be used as a tool. Bryn made sure everyone understood that Serafina knew about this clause long before she married him. She didn't need a real pregnancy. She only needed the appearance of one long enough for the payout to go through. And with my parents supporting her, she had every reason to believe the plan would work. The wedding, Bryn said, was the perfect stage for it. A public announcement at my reception would create witnesses, pictures, and videos. It would give the story weight, making it harder for Holden's family to question anything later. By the time doubts surfaced, the money would already be in her hands. The room reacted with soft gasps and quiet murmurs. Holden's face tightened. He looked like everything he believed had been flipped upside down. He wasn't angry yet, just stunned in a way that made his silence painful to watch. Bryn continued, switching to another document. This time, it was a spreadsheet of financial records. The numbers were long and alarming. She explained that Serafina had fallen into heavy debt over the past few years. Her online boutique, which she bragged about constantly, had never gained momentum. Instead, it lost money every month. And when it began failing, she turned to risky crypto investments that only made things worse. The debts were enormous, far beyond anything she could pay. My parents had stepped in quietly, covering her losses behind closed doors. They had used their retirement savings to patch the holes, telling themselves she would eventually pay them back. But the hole only grew deeper, and Serafina knew there was no way out except through Holden's inheritance. People stared in disbelief. Many had seen my parents present themselves as proud, responsible adults. Seeing their involvement in something this calculated left the room unsettled. Then Sterling stood abruptly. His chair scraped across the floor, loud enough to echo. His face was red, his eyes furious. He moved toward the stage with heavy steps, ignoring the stairs, looking ready to rip the microphone from Bryn's hands. Before he could reach her, Asher and two of his groomsmen stepped forward. They were already prepared. Asher placed a hand on Sterling's chest and told him firmly to stop. The groomsmen blocked the steps, preventing him from getting any closer. Sterling glared at them, but he couldn't push through. His anger only made him look smaller as the room continued to absorb the truth he could no longer control. I watched from my seat, feeling a strange steadiness. For once, the lies were not being protected. For once, the truth was louder than my family. Holden's voice trembled as he stood, looking like he was barely holding himself together. The medication, she said it was just for vitamins, he said, his words breaking in disbelief. Was any of this real? I could see the confusion and hurt in his eyes, the way his world had been turned upside down in minutes. Bryn didn't hesitate. She tapped the tablet and the screen shifted. Images appeared, photographs, bank transfers, and documents that laid everything bare. My stomach tightened as the room absorbed the weight of the evidence. It wasn't just a lie about a pregnancy. It was a deliberate cover for something much darker. The photos showed Serafina meeting secretly with Malcolm Crew, the family's financial advisor. Their relationship was clearly more than professional. Bryn explained how they had worked together for months, quietly moving funds out of Holden's investment accounts, laundering them through various transfers that no one outside the inner circle could notice. Every transaction, every receipt, every digital footprint was accounted for. The fake pregnancy had been a perfect distraction. It allowed large sums of money to be shifted under the guise of baby expenses and future savings. The withdrawals lined up exactly with the dates of the supposed pregnancy milestones. The more the truth unfolded, the clearer it became that Serafina's plan had been careful, patient, and completely selfish. I could see the shock ripple through the guests. Some covered their mouths. Others leaned forward, trying to catch every word. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was marital, personal, and deeply humiliating. Everyone in that room realized that Serafina's charm and smiles had hidden months of calculated deceit. Malcolm's face went pale as Bryn pointed him out in the crowd. He moved quickly, trying to slip toward the exit, but several guests stepped in front of him, blocking his way. His eyes darted around, and I could almost see the panic rising behind his calm exterior. He had thought he could hide in plain sight, but in that moment he was exposed. Holden remained frozen for a moment, silent, letting the images sink in. I watched as the disbelief slowly transformed into quiet anger and heartbreak. He had trusted her, had believed in their marriage, and now every word, every promise, every gesture he had relied on was revealed as a lie. Bryn didn't raise her voice or add commentary. She simply let the evidence speak for itself. Each transfer, each photo, each message told the story of betrayal more clearly than any argument ever could. I stayed seated, feeling a strange sense of release. For years, I had lived in the shadow of their lies, their schemes, and their control. Now the truth was out, visible to everyone, undeniable and irreversible. The lies that had shaped so much of my family's life were crumbling, and nothing could put them back together. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the monitors, holding the images that would never let Serafina or Malcolm hide again. It was a moment I would remember forever, painful, shocking, and utterly liberating. Serafina collapsed all at once. Her anger, her pride, her carefully constructed image, all of it fell apart in front of everyone. One moment she was screaming, accusing Bryn of fabricating evidence, her words sharp and wild. The next, her voice broke, and she sank to the floor, sobbing in a way that made her look smaller than she ever had. The mask she had worn for so long, the confidence, the charm, the control, was completely gone. I watched her crumble, and for a moment the room seemed suspended in time. Guests couldn't move or speak. Their faces were full of disbelief, some shaking their heads, others covering their mouths. Shock, embarrassment, and anger mingled in the air, and it pressed down on everyone like a heavy weight. I felt the tension, but I didn't panic. I knew this moment was mine to step into. Bryn, calm as ever, turned to me and handed me the microphone. I took it, feeling the smooth weight in my hands, and looked out across the crowd. My parents were frozen, their expressions a mixture of anger and helplessness. My sister, lying on the floor, glanced up at me with tear-streaked cheeks, a silent plea for something that I no longer had to give. The room held its breath, waiting for what I would say. I spoke slowly, deliberately, making sure every word landed. This morning, my family tried to force me into complicity. They used fear and violence to try to make me play a role in a lie. My eyes swept over my parents, their faces pale and rigid. Then I looked down at Serafina, the woman who had spent years trying to overshadow me, who had schemed and plotted to control everything. And finally, I turned to the guests, the friends, the relatives, and strangers who had been caught in this spectacle. They chose her scheme over my happiness, I continued, my voice steady, almost eerily calm. They thought I would stay silent, that I would let the truth be hidden. But now, everyone can see what their choices cost them. The words hung in the air, heavy, unflinching, and undeniable. I set the microphone down carefully, not needing to add another word. The room remained silent for a long moment, each person processing the magnitude of what had just been revealed. Serafina's sobs softened, replaced by stunned silence. My parents' anger faded into shame. The guests shifted uneasily, some nodding quietly, others staring in disbelief. For the first time that day, I felt completely in control. The lies and manipulations had been exposed, and I was free of the weight my family had always tried to place on me. The truth was out, raw and undeniable, and I didn't need to fight anymore. I had spoken, and the room and my family would never forget it. The chaos didn't last long, but its impact lingered. Holden left quietly with his siblings, his face tight and unreadable, leaving Serafina behind to face the wreckage she had caused. My mother and father, their anger barely contained, half-dragged her toward the exit, her cries echoing through the hall. I stayed seated for a moment, letting the room settle, feeling the tension slowly ease. Asher stepped close and wrapped his arm around me. I leaned into him, feeling the steady strength I had always trusted. Around us, his family and a few close friends formed a protective circle, shielding us from the shockwaves still rippling through the room. I realized then how much of this night belonged to us, not to anyone trying to manipulate or control it. I took a deep breath and turned to Asher. "Let's not let them ruin this," I said softly. He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. We had been robbed of the morning, of the staged perfection my family had tried to impose, but we still had the night, and we would make it ours. I asked the DJ to play a song that mattered to us, a loud, defiant rock anthem that had always made us feel alive, untouchable, and unstoppable. The first notes filled the hall, and for a moment everything else disappeared. I held Asher close and let the music guide our movements. Our steps were raw and honest, a dance not of elegance but of freedom reclaimed. At first, it was just the two of us. The floor seemed empty, the space ours alone, and it felt good to move without restraint, to let go of the weight my family had tried to place on me all morning. Then, slowly, our inner circle friends who had stayed loyal, who had supported me quietly for years, joined us. They moved with energy and pride, surrounding us in a protective, joyful ring. The crowd cheered, not for the spectacle my family had tried to orchestrate, but for the strength, honesty, and resilience we now embodied. The party transformed entirely. The previous tension faded into laughter, conversation, and the sound of celebration that was real, not forced. Guests who had felt awkward or uncertain found themselves caught up in the energy of the night. It was no longer about deception or control. It was about loyalty, courage, and the choice to stand with truth. I felt a weight lift from my chest. The night had started with betrayal and pain, but it would end with connection and empowerment. My family could no longer dictate the story. The room now belonged to the people who had chosen honesty and love over lies. I danced, laughed, and let myself be fully present, knowing we had taken back what was ours and transformed it into something far more meaningful than any staged perfection could ever be. In the weeks after the wedding, the consequences of the night's revelations unfolded quickly. Holden moved decisively, filing for divorce and opening a civil case against Serafina and Malcolm. Every piece of evidence Bryn had gathered, receipts, messages, financial records, became part of the legal assault, leaving no room for deniability. It was clear that the lies and manipulation would finally have real consequences, and justice was beginning to take shape. Serafina's world collapsed under the weight of her own schemes. The carefully hidden debts, the fraudulent transfers, and the elaborate pretenses she had relied on for years all unraveled. She no longer had anyone to cover for her mistakes. My parents, Evangeline and Sterling, who had once quietly patched over her failures with their savings, found themselves exposed. Their funds were drained, their credibility damaged, and their social standing had taken an unmistakable hit. They could no longer protect her, and they knew it. Meanwhile, I began to feel the aftermath in a different way. My parents' messages came relentlessly, each one dripping with blame. They accused me of destroying the family name and airing dirty laundry, expecting me to feel guilt for revealing the truth. I read them once and then set my resolve. Their words could no longer manipulate me. I realized that protecting them had cost me too much over the years, and it was finally time to draw firm boundaries. With Asher and Bryn by my side, I took steps to protect myself and my peace. My lawyer drafted a no-contact letter, clearly stating that my parents and Serafina were not to reach me through any means. I changed my phone number, updated my email, and blocked them across social media platforms. Every possible channel of intrusion was closed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of control over my life. Therapy became a vital part of my recovery. I needed to unpack the years of being the family scapegoat, the lies I had been forced to tolerate, the manipulations I had endured, and the ways I had been silenced. Each session helped me reclaim pieces of myself that had been buried under my parents' and sisters' schemes. I began to understand that my loyalty and kindness had been weaponized against me, and it was okay to finally put myself first. As the dust settled, I noticed a growing sense of relief and quiet satisfaction. Justice was being served, not just in court, but in the freedom I had carved for myself. Serafina's schemes could no longer touch me. My parents' pressure and judgment had lost their power. For the first time, I could live without fear, without manipulation, and without being trapped in a narrative that was never mine. The aftermath was difficult, but it was also liberating. I was finally building a life defined by truth, honesty, and boundaries. The pain and betrayal were real, but so was my newfound freedom, and I intended to protect it fiercely. A year had passed, and the world felt lighter. Asher and I decided to celebrate our love quietly, far from the chaos my family had caused. We hosted a small vow renewal in our backyard, surrounded only by people who had stood by us, our chosen family. Bryn stood beside me as my official witness, her calm presence a reminder of the strength that had carried us through the storm. I wore a delicate new headpiece, a thoughtful gift from Bryn. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a symbol. Every sparkle reminded me of the life I had reclaimed, the joy I had fought for, and the freedom I now carried. The morning sun touched the garden, and for the first time, I felt fully present in a moment that was truly mine. During the celebration, a kind aunt shared news I hadn't expected. My parents had been forced to sell their home and move to a smaller, cheaper place. Serafina, stripped of her schemes, was working a retail job and dealing with ongoing lawsuits. The consequences of their actions had caught up with them, and while I didn't feel satisfaction from their struggles, I recognized the justice in life correcting itself. As I stood there, feeling the warmth of my friends and Asher's unwavering support, I realized my own life was blossoming. I was expecting my first child, a new chapter filled with hope and possibility. The thought of the life we would create, one built on honesty and care, filled me with a quiet joy I hadn't known before. No schemes, no competition, no betrayal, just love that was freely given and freely received. I thought back to the wedding day that had once felt like the end of everything I knew. That day had destroyed my old life, but it had also pushed me toward a life I would never have imagined otherwise. I didn't feel anger or bitterness toward my parents or Serafina. Those emotions had faded, leaving only relief and an overwhelming sense of freedom. I made a promise to myself and to my child. Our family would be different. Love in our home would never come with conditions or comparisons. There would be no hidden motives, no forced sacrifices, no manipulation. We would live openly, honestly, and with intention. Every choice would be ours, guided by respect and care, not fear or obligation. In that quiet backyard, surrounded by the people who mattered most, I finally felt whole. The pain of the past remained a memory, but it no longer held power over me. My legacy would not be one of deceit or control, but of resilience, clarity, and true love. I understood then that the ultimate revenge is not revenge at all. It is peace, the kind that comes from building a life on your own terms and watching the cycle of manipulation end with you. And in that moment, I knew I had won everything that truly mattered. I finally freed myself from years of lies and betrayal, building a life filled with love, honesty, and peace. Do you think I made the right choice by cutting them out, or should I have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them.